Apothecary on the wave.
Shoes off, pause, yeah, let's get it. Shoes off, but the vibes stay loud. Apothecary heat, yeah, I'm flexing in the crowd. Socks on the scene, that's a subtle little flex. Talking drip in the pod, yeah, we setting the next.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first solo dolo and possibly only solo dolo episode of the Shoes Off podcast. My name is Seth. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you wondering why there is no guest today, and also for me, because I'm filming at 12 o'clock at night, why am I doing this? Well, because I just got back from VidCon in Anaheim, California. I live in Philly. I just landed yesterday, and my plan was to film a couple episodes out there, and I did film one really great episode with Kai Somar. By the time this episode drops, you guys will have already seen that episode, but unfortunately, my other guest could not make it. Good friend of mine, and no problems there. Just we got so busy with the event, we weren't able to do it. So with that being said, I am short an episode, and in my pursuit of trying to have an episode every single week, although we did miss 1 week for technical difficulty issues, we actually filmed the whole episode, and then it just wasn't able to release because it wasn't good. The audio didn't record. I'm going to give you guys my story because I feel like as people who maybe watch my YouTube channel and came to this podcast from the YouTube channel, maybe you've heard parts of it, maybe you've heard all of it, or maybe you don't care. I don't know. If you don't care, maybe don't watch this episode because it's just me. But I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you are watching on YouTube, shout out to you, but also you might have been wondering why there's a 2-camera setup that seems pretty redundant because actually the angles are pretty similar to one another. The reason for that is because I wanted some semblance of normality when it comes to this podcast. So hopefully I don't throw my editor Rad for a loop when he when he gets the files that look almost exactly the same, but shout out to you, Rad. But yeah, so I just wanted to use this podcast as a way to kind of introduce myself, give you guys some background on me and sort of, you know, how I got to where I am, because this whole podcast is about talking to creators and creatives and to find out how they got to where they are. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about my story because, well, 1, because I don't have a guest, and 2, because maybe you guys are interested. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Before we dive into that, though, I want to give a huge thank you to the sponsor of this episode and the sponsor of every episode, my sock brand, Apothecary, which, of course, we will talk about later on in the podcast. I actually don't really have a plan for this episode. I was planning to make a plan, but I didn't make a plan. So we're starting things off with a sponsor. So shout out to my own brand, who doesn't actually support the podcast financially because it's my own brand. So it's, you know, either way. Guys, check out Apothecary socks. They're the best socks out there. They're incredibly comfortable. They feel great on your feet. They're very breathable. We've got IsoWeave, which is our proprietary knit technology. It's little triangles on the midfoot. They look like triangles, to be honest, and that's one of the reasons why we called it IsoWeave, because it's kind of like isometric weave. There's a little tidbit of information for you guys, but it does work, and it really helps your foot kind of fit in the sock perfectly. So in addition to fitting well, feeling great, we also drop limited collections and collaborations every week, or every other week, depending on, you know, which month it is in the year, but very often, and they sell out very quickly. So if you guys want a chance to grab some of the fire new drops that we're dropping this week and next week and the week after, make sure to check out our website, apothecary.com, and sign up for our email list. But with that being said, let's dive into this week's episode. So usually in these podcasts, I like to ask guests, tell me, you know, where you came from, the beginning of your story. So I'm going to do the same thing for me. I'm not going to ask myself questions because that would be weird, but I'm just going to kind of go from the very beginning. So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, or, you know, as a lot of people like to say, who grew up outside of cities. I grew up within the city limits-ish in the county. I guess not technically within the city limits. I actually grew up outside of Baltimore City in Randallstown, which is sort of a suburb of Baltimore. It's about 20 minutes from M&T Bank Stadium. And I lived there from, you know, the early 90s until I went to college. I was in the same house. I grew up in the same place. And it was a really great experience. It was one of those, you know, sort of suburban houses that had some land attached to it. It was a very small house, but we did have, you know, an acre or two. It was an old farm. And I just spent a lot of time outdoors. I don't know why I'm starting from there. This seems really early to start to tell you guys about my YouTube journey and I guess the design journey, but here we go. So I grew up in Maryland, and I went to sort of a private Christian school. I was going to call it a college. It wasn't a college. Sort of split between homeschool and that. So a lot of people in my life like to make fun of me for being partially homeschooled. The joke usually being, oh wow, you got really good grades. Did you give yourself those grades? Did your mom give you those grades? And in some way she did. But they were earned. It's not like I was just messing around. I did earn those grades, and they weren't amazing, but they were fine. The one thing I didn't excel at, though, and I haven't excelled at, has always been math. So math was one that I failed out of in both high school and in college and had to retake multiple times. And it sort of led me to the idea of art. You know, I had always loved drawing. I'd always loved sketching. And realizing that math was something that wasn't my strong suit, you know, pretty quickly directed me away from any professions that required math, like aeronautical engineering or engineering of any kind. Now, what's interesting is that my parents both had pretty different disciplines. One was an engineer and one was an artist. My mom being the artist, she was a graphic designer. And I feel like the field that I chose was sort of a perfect mix of the two, albeit with less math. So I decided to go to college for product design, which is sort of a 3D version of graphic design. It's designing any physical product that can be used. So it could be phones, it could be chairs, it could be shoes, it could be whatever. And that was sort of, I guess, a direction that slowly became apparent as I went through my high school years. I really loved art, but I wanted to do something that wasn't specifically graphic design for a lot of different reasons, some being financial, others being, I just like the idea of creating something physical that I could touch. But I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I'm also stumbling over my words, guys. I'm not great at talking just for an extended period of time. You guys don't see this behind the camera, but usually, my shout out to editor Rad and editor Tim, both of my editors. They probably have seen many retakes of a lot of lines. So whenever I drop like a 30-minute video, it's usually like 2 hours worth of filming, and it's just very nicely cut up and edited. I'm sure I've left some of those in there over the years that you guys have seen, the mistakes. But getting ahead of myself. So grew up in Maryland, realized I sucked at math, realized I like art, partially homeschooled, played some basketball at a local Christian private school league situation. I wasn't actually going to that school, so I couldn't actually play for the league itself. I had to kind of play in summer leagues and then play at the sort of offshoot during the school year. And as much as I love the game of basketball and as much as I've always loved the game of basketball, I was never good at it. I'm not built for it. I was always a pretty skinny dude. I was always not the tallest dude in the world, but I was a very average height. Like I'm 5'10" when I stand up straight, 5'11" when I stand up straight. Let me say that, 5'11", and so I didn't excel in basketball. I'm not the most coordinated person either, but I really had a passion for it. I really enjoyed it. So I had this basketball hoop outside of the back of my house. We had this patio made of brick, and it was very uneven, and playing basketball on it sucked because the ball would just go in all different directions. And my dad told me, that's great because it'll help you dribble because you'll learn how to, deal with the ball kind of bouncing all over the place. And I guess in some ways it did. But, it's like polishing a turd. It's still a turd, but it's like, I guess it's a shiny turd. And that was my basketball handles, I guess, after I moved out of that house. But one thing I really enjoyed as a kid and just growing up was just thinking out back, shooting hoops. I just sounded so white the way I said that, but shooting hoops out back for hours, just kind of thinking about things, whether it was a lot of times it was creating, inventions in my head or whatever, and that sounds stupid, but it was really something that I enjoyed doing. I loved coming up with like this imaginary game console. I've always been into gaming, and like coming up with an imaginary game console to sort of rival the PlayStation and the Xbox. We're really going deep here. And I would design it in my head. I would design the way it looked. I would design the sort of launch lineups, and I spent hours doing that. And it wasn't just that, but it was like a lot of different things. It would be either, game consoles, or it would be, in some cases, sneakers, in some cases, cars. I would just sit out back and just start these businesses in my head. And I just did it for fun. It was never something I really thought like, oh, maybe I'll start a business when I get older. So after years of just, I guess, growing up, to be honest with you, I was very, very blessed. I had a pretty easy upbringing. I'm a pretty privileged person, I think, in terms of not having to deal with a lot growing up. And I recognize that, and I just feel incredibly lucky and blessed that, I was put in a position where I had a family that was together. We just had a pretty stable home life, which I was very lucky about. So growing up in that way, it was a pretty, I would say it was a pretty non-exciting childhood. I'll say that. Then I went off to college. Before college, though, I had kind of worked some, side jobs, as we all do as a teenager. I worked at Target for a while. I worked at Vans, which is sort of where my love of sneakers really became a thing. I'd always liked sneakers, but mainly my love of sneakers came mostly from basketball. I loved basketball. I loved watching the games. I loved the players, and I loved seeing what they had on their feet. And with that sort of design sense that I had, I guess you could call it, I always sort of redesigned the shoes in my head. And so while it was never, I wasn't like running out to the store and buying the latest Jordans when I was 12, I always was aware of them and was interested in them. So Vans is where things really took off because I worked at the Vans store in the Columbia Mall. Shout out to anyone in Maryland who knows that mall. And right next to it was a DTLR. And every Saturday, or I guess it was every Friday at that point, every Friday there would be these drops for sneakers. The one I remember most vividly was the copper foam posits. I saw it in the window and I was like, that shoe's crazy. Like, I'd love to grab that shoe. And there was a huge line when I came into work that day. And I thought, okay, after my shift, I'm going to walk in and grab it. And it was just completely sold out. And it was also expensive, to be fair. And I realized at that point that, okay, these sneakers, they move. Like, this isn't something that just kind of, these popular releases really move. And this was sort of around the time, this was 2008, 2009, like near the end of my high school years. And I noticed, there was a lot of stuff going on in sneakers where things would just sell out. Like, you had the Pigeon Dunks, you had the 11s, all those crazy line was for the 11s. I was never involved in any of those, but I was aware of them. And then going off to college, I kind of just dove into my love of design. I went to a design school, Drexel. It's not technically a design school, but they have a great design program. That's where I met Osman, the co-founder of Apothecary, who has not been on the podcast the last couple months. I'll let him tell you why. But he had a bit of an injury and literally has been out of commission for months. So that's why we don't have the co-host, and that's why we haven't had the co-host. We'll do an episode, him and I sort of talking about that. That's in the plan, so stay tuned for that. But I went to college. I met Osman, met my wife there actually too, and just kept growing in the design field. Like, I just kept learning design, loving design, and getting more and more into it. And while I was doing that, I was working at Urban Outfitters in Philadelphia, and I started to, have some money set to the side. I was like, okay, cool. I have like a couple $100 extra at the end of every couple weeks. Like, every paycheck, I'd pay, whatever I needed to pay at the time. I was very blessed. My parents were paying for my housing. I did take out loans and I got a scholarship. So that was generally where most of my tuition was covered by. I didn't end up paying that off until after I graduated. Working at Urban Outfitters would kind of be spending money, because my parents are obviously not gonna, they're not gonna buy alcohol for me. They're not gonna do things like that. So basically, they paid for whatever was left over the tuition. They paid for my housing, but then everything else was kind of like, you're on your own with this. You got this. You don't really need much money to live as a college student. So, I'd buy my ramen here and there. I'd go to the food hall as much as I could, and I'd use extra money for fun stuff, whether it was going to Chipotle, whether it was buying, let's just say some beers from a place that didn't card, and buying sneakers, which was probably not the best idea at the time, but I do think it's one of the reasons why I'm where I'm at today. So I would go on this Facebook group called Buy, Sell, Fresh Kicks Philly, which Osman told me about. Shout out to Osman. Grew up in Philly or around Philly, so he sort of knew all the Facebook groups and the different places I could buy sneakers that I couldn't get usually at release days. And I started buying used sneakers. And what I would do, actually, because I had an art degree and I'd always been into painting, I was like, why don't we customize these sneakers and try and resell some of them? So what I did is I bought some, I tried painting them, and tried reselling them. The problem is that when I painted these sneakers, I would just kind of paint them in styles that I liked. So they weren't really selling. I only did it twice, and I realized that's not the way to do this. But I was able to use these sneakers that weren't selling as a way to promote what I wanted to do, or the things that I could do. So I went on the Buy Sell Fresh Kicks Philly Facebook group, posted some pictures of customs I had done, and then posted some sketches of customs I wanted to do, and was like, hey, if you guys want custom sneakers done, $50, I'll pick them up from you in Philly, I'll paint them in a week and give them back to you. And I actually pretty quickly got some bites. The first custom I did was for a guy who I think I still follow on Facebook, I think, or Instagram probably. It was for his son, and it was the Mystery Machine Scooby-Doo's, and it was on a pair of 5s. And I was so happy with that custom. It came out so good, and I took a bunch of pictures of that, posted it on my Instagram, and from there it kind of took off. Like, I would probably have 3 or 4 customs a week, charging anywhere between $50 to $100 for these customs. Obviously still working at Urban Outfitters and still doing school. And that was really where I realized, okay, you know what? Sneakers are something that can be not only a hobby, but also possibly a side business. So from there, I just kept doing it the next couple of years. I eventually ended up interning in New York City at a couple different places. Most notably, Martha Stewart was where I interned for a while, which actually ended up helping get some of my other jobs after I graduated. We'll talk about that later. But I interned for Martha Stewart. Really crazy experience. A lot of really great people that I worked with. And I did actually interact with Martha Stewart on a pretty regular basis, surprisingly for, at 19, I guess at that point, maybe a 21-year-old intern, which was wild because I grew up watching Martha Stewart. So that was crazy. I won't go into it too much because nothing really crazy happened to me at all. And I had a really good experience. So shout out to Martha. She actually had me on her podcast at one point. She did a podcast with a couple of the interns, the standout interns. You know, I felt very special when I got picked for that. To be fair, I was one of the only male interns there. Actually, the only male intern. There's like 50 interns. They were all girls, and then me. So, of course, I was going to get picked because they had like 6 girls, and then they wanted a guy. So I was picked for that. So I got interviewed by Martha Stewart in her podcast on Sirius Radio, I think, is where it was, which was such a cool experience. She signed a book. Still have the book. Pretty cool. But from there, I realized, okay, cool. I love this design firm sort of feeling. I love the idea of working for a design firm. I love the fact that it could always be working on something different. Now, in the case of Martha Stewart, I was working on kitchenware, but it was always something different, like maybe a different kind of trivet or a different kind of, spatula or something like that. Now, it doesn't sound that exciting, but as a designer who had always dreamed of making actual products, working on things that were actually going to be in Targets and in store, I don't know if it was Target specifically, but in stores like that was so cool to me. And so I knew that it solidified in my mind creating products was what I wanted to do. Now, at the same time, I'm still customizing sneakers. I'm commuting to and from New York every day, literally every day from Philly. So I'm taking a 2.5-hour train ride in the morning. It's actually 2 trains. I would walk from my apartment right next to the Rocky Steps over to 30th Street Station, which is like maybe a 15-minute walk, and then take the SEPTA to Trenton, New Jersey, and then take the NJT from Trenton, New Jersey to New York Penn Station, and then walk another 20 minutes. So all told, my workday would start at 10, and I would leave the house at probably about 5:30 or 6. And I would do that every day for the internship. And at the time, it didn't feel like a big deal because I was doing what I loved. I had a lot of good friends at that office. I'm still in touch with some of them. And I don't know, it was just a really cool experience. And it was actually one thing I love about Drexel. I liked a lot about Drexel, but one thing I liked about Drexel was that they had the internship program. So not only, like a lot of colleges encourage you to take internships, but not only did they do that, they sort of required it. So we had, I think like they basically gave us 6 months of just straight internships in the middle of our college career during junior year. And as a way to sort of make up for that scholastically, we didn't have summers. So we'd have all year round school. And I think they still do that to this day. I think that's sort of their selling point. You get the first summer, your freshman summer off, and then the remaining summers you're either working in an internship or you are just doing school, which was fine because when I left Maryland, a lot of my friends had moved out. My parents had moved. My mom and my dad had moved to Kansas at that point. And so no one was there really that I wanted to see. I had gotten out of a breakup, and I just didn't want to be there. I just didn't want to see anybody. There was no one really even that wanted to see me. So I was out. Maryland was done for me at that point. So I didn't mind staying in Philly. I'm interning, making $10 a day. It was a $10 food stipend. Customizing sneakers to sort of make up for that. I had stopped working at Urban Outfitters at this point. And, just kind of getting college classes done when I could. I guess the point of that was that I'm still buying sneakers. Because obviously, I'm realizing now that you guys probably mainly only care about the sneaker stuff. So I should supplement this by saying, throughout high school, I would make YouTube videos. It was sort of a second passion of mine. Designing in my head, playing basketball, and then making YouTube videos. I wasn't like a cool kid, and the basketball especially didn't help because I sucked at basketball, and I was very uncoordinated, like I said, so I didn't look good playing basketball. So I wasn't one of the cool kids. I wouldn't say I was a loner. I had friends, but I wasn't a popular kid. So as many of the unpopular kids would do, I sort of delved into the internet. I got really deep into MySpace. I got really deep into Stupid Videos, which is it was literally a website called Stupid Videos, where I'd re-upload content and from other people. It was not the right thing to do, but at the time, I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, okay, cool. I'm trying to get higher on this leaderboard. And I think on Stupid Videos, they had sort of this ranking system, so you could see whoever had the most views. My friend, actually, my best friend to this day, one of my best friends to this day, was number 2 on the leaderboard of all of the Stupid Videos website. His name was Smash360 on the website. And I was like on page 2, which was a pretty big accomplishment for a 16-year-old on a website that had, thousands and thousands and thousands of users. But it was basically like a crappier version of YouTube where all the content was re-uploaded. Around that time, I guess that was earlier than high school. That might have been middle school, actually. That was definitely middle school because when YouTube came out in 2005, I started posting like little skits on YouTube because I was watching a lot of YouTubers around the beginning. I guess it was closer to 2006 that I actually started watching, but I was watching a lot of YouTubers like The Wine Cone or Smosh, like people like that. And it just got me really excited. I'm like, I could do this. Like, this is sick. And no one was getting paid at the time. No one was really getting any clout from it. It wasn't like, again, There wasn't any cool kids making content. There wasn't any there wasn't any like T-Jess. There wasn't any T-Jess or Jessers or Chris Londons or PewDiePies or Logan Pauls or whatever making content. It was people making skits on YouTube. And I decided that was something I wanted to do. So throughout high school, in addition to the things that I was talking about, I was also making skit videos, which have been scrubbed. So don't try and look for them. But I did have one sort of breakthrough moment on YouTube when I was younger. And I think if I had done things differently, my YouTube career could have been completely different. And that was back in 2007, I released a review on an Xbox. It was a specific variant of the Xbox. And it was terrible. It was awful. But it was in the style that I still review sneakers to this day. And for some reason, the video blew up. In like the first couple months, it had 10 to 50,000 views. And then, by the end of the year, it had 300,000 views. And I think because of that video, I got accepted into the YouTube Partner Program in 2013, which was years later. But because I had hit like a threshold of viewership, I was able to be accepted in. Maybe it was after or maybe it was before 2013. I don't remember exactly when I got the invite to it. But rather than continuing on posting tech videos, even with that success, I decided to keep posting skits because I'm like, well, people just want to watch skits. That's all they care about. And it wasn't, because around the same time MKBHD was starting, he was reviewing everything and killing it. And I think in my head, if I just continued that path, I still love sneakers, and I still would have loved sneakers, but I think I would have probably been a more tech-focused channel. And I think that my college career might have been different, because if I had been making decent money doing that, I probably wouldn't have ended up going to college. But that's something that didn't happen. It doesn't matter. That being said, that was sort of the start of my YouTube career. I dabbled again with YouTube in college a little bit, kind of trying to review things here and there. I went back to tech reviews a little bit. I reviewed like the iPad or whatever generation of iPad it was. I think it was the iPad 3 or something in 2000 and maybe 10. It was definitely 2010. And the way I was able to get one is that I convinced my parents to pay for half of it because it was a business expense. I was like, listen, I'm going to do a video. It's going to make a lot of money. If you could loan me half the money for it, I'll pay the other half. I think it was like $600. So I saved up $300 working at Urban Outfitters. Yeah, and I reviewed it. It didn't do well. It got like 2,000 views, which still at the time with a brand new channel was decent. And it just didn't go anywhere. So I would try videos here and there, but they just didn't take off. I reviewed some of my friends' phones. Didn't really take off. So I scrapped it. So I graduate college with the product design degree. And then I moved to New York City without a job because I'm like, this is where I want to be. This is the mecca of design. This is what I want to do. So I moved to New York City. I find a apartment that was $500 a month out in Queens. It was actually right on the far stop of the M. I can tell you guys now because it doesn't matter. It was right on the far stop of the M. And I was living with 3 other guys, one of which I actually knew from college. And I didn't know the 2 other guys who lived there. I think it was a guy and a girl actually at the time. I didn't know them, but I told my friend, like, hey, listen, there's a 4-person apartment I found. I know you want to live in New York. I know you've got a job in New York. He was, I think, living in Jersey City. And I was like, listen, it's $500 a month. If you move in with me or move into the room next to me, we can make this work. And he's like, cool. So we did it. I lived there the entire time I was in New York. It was actually a really great experience with some people I ended up, really becoming good friends with. And yeah, I started looking for jobs. So for that first like 2 or 3 months, I was out on a limb. I didn't really have anything going on, and I didn't really have any money. So I was $500 a month was reasonable. So I was able to find ways of paying it off. There's one app that I found that like you could do. I don't know if it was like do reviews of local bodegas or something, but the app would pay you from different brands would basically say take a picture of our display in a bodega, and you'd get like $5 for each picture that you took, or $3 or something like that. And because in Queens there were so many bodegas around me, I could hit like 30 a night. So I'd ride my bike, or I think at the time it was a skateboard. I would ride my skateboard around Queens, taking photos of like chip displays and stuff. I'd sneak in. Well, they weren't a huge fan of me not buying anything in these bodegas, so they'd be like, "Hey, what do you need, buddy?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just checking things out." I take a picture and then kind of run out. So I'd make like probably like $20 to $50 a day just doing that. And that's how I'd pay my rent. It was that, and then still customizing sneakers. The sneakers, New York, was a little bit harder because there wasn't as good of a Facebook group. Like Buy, Sell, Fresh Kicks Philly was it. It was fire. It was amazing. But I was still posting about my sneaker customization. So I was doing all of that, looking for a job. I finally found a job out in Long Island, which unfortunately was another 2-hour train ride away from my apartment in Queens, because I'd basically have to take the M to the J. It was the M to the J. So I take the M from Forest to the J in was it Myrtle Wyckoff? I think it was Myrtle Wyckoff. And then I take the J down to Jamaica, and then take the LIRR from Jamaica all the way to Westbury, where I designed kitchenware at this place for about a year, 2 years. I worked there. I got a full-time job. It was my first full-time job out of college. I was making at the time what I thought was incredible money, and I started splurging on sneakers, like to not a disgusting degree, because I've always been decent with money, but never like amazing with. I'm getting better now, but never amazing with money. So I would spend probably more than I needed to on sneakers. And because I was customizing sneakers at the time, I would start posting photos of like the sneakers that I really liked on my timeline in between the customs. And I just started buying more and more sneakers, and it got to a point where I'm like, okay, I have to sell some of these, but there's got to be some other way. Like, I can't even wear all of these. Like, there's got to be something I can do with these that at least justifies me buying them. So at that point, I was watching a lot of sneaker YouTube. I was watching Tony D2 Wild. I was watching Nightwing. I was watching Tom Stefanik, The Real Ray Ray 20. I was watching Hess Kicks. I think Sneaker Talk was coming up at that point, watching him. I was watching Yoanti. I love Yoanti. I wish he was still making content. Fomer Simpson. There's a bunch of other guys. Kais was coming up at that point. I was watching everybody. And I was like, dude, like, this is sick. I would love to do this. And I have a design background. Like, I can come at it from a design background. I can talk about these sneakers from the point of view of someone who can design products. Now, I hadn't specifically designed sneakers at that point, but I had customized sneakers, so I was very familiar with the construction. And I'd worked in some manufacturing because I'd made kitchenware before, and I'd worked with factories. So I knew generally what it took to make a sneaker, and I had some understanding of sneaker materials, albeit pretty limited, but more than I would say, other people in the space had at the time. So I started reviewing sneakers. I started buying sneakers from Foot Locker, reviewing them, generally just trying them on, and then returning them. And a couple Foot Lockers in the city weren't happy with me because I kept doing that. Like, I'd probably buy 3 sneakers a week and then return them the next week. And they started to realize who I was, and they're like, listen, you can't keep doing this. So I just go to a different Foot Locker. The first video I did, which I think I actually reposted when I hit 1 million in 2022, was the Air Jordan 30, I think. Now, that video, I reviewed the shoe not as a performance review because I wanted to get it out the day of, and I was playing basketball a little bit at the time in New York leagues, but I was, again, terrible. I was able to score here and there. I wasn't just a bench player, but I wasn't great. A funny story about that was the first time I actually played in a sort of a nighttime league. It was in Manhattan. A friend of mine from my job was like, yo, you should come play with me, because he was actually pretty decent. And I was like, cool, let's do it. And the way that they picked teams was through free throws. And I had always, because I was playing, in the backyard on that basketball patio by myself, I was really good at free throws because that's all I could really do. So I was great at free throws. The problem was, because I was so good at free throws, I hit all my free throws, like no problem. So I was put on this insane team with all these great players, these super tall, like ripped guys. And I was just this lanky, tiny little, like skinny white guy who just was not coordinated at all. So the problem was, it was like, you win, you keep playing. So we literally kept winning, and I just had to keep playing. I was completely out of shape. I'm not as out of shape now as I was then, but I'm still not like in the best shape in the world. But I was very out of shape, so I was just dead. It was like 2 or 3 hours we were playing with like one break in between, and I was like, this is awful. I can't do this. So I later I didn't play in that same league again because I was like, I can't do this. But I did play, around the city, and I would just try and avoid, if they were doing free throws to pick teams, I would try and miss one here or there. But I will say, I did hit some nice layups. I'm not gonna lie, because no one I was the kind of guy that was like, no one would pass me the ball, but then here and there I'd get a steal and I'd go up for a layup and it would go in. I'd be like, this is great. Like, I scored 6 points in the course of like 4 games against these giant dudes. So I was proud of myself for that. I totally got off track. So yeah, I reviewed the Air Jordan 30, bought it from Foot Locker on the day it released, put out the review that night, and the next day it had 1,000 views. And I was like, shoot, this is crazy. And from there I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Not realizing that the next 6 months to a year would be just every day reviewing sneakers that I either had or that I'd buy for basically no views. It was literally like a year before I think I hit, maybe 6 months before I hit 10,000, and then a year before I got any kind of like paycheck. Like, I think there's a threshold on YouTube of $100, and for the first 6 months, nothing. I was part of the partner program because of that first Xbox video I had done, and I think the partner program or your AdSense account is linked to your social security number or something like that. So no matter how many different YouTube accounts you have, if they're owned by the same person, they all have the same AdSense account. So I actually already had an AdSense account set up. So I think for that account, account was either monetized right away, because they've changed it now where there's like a threshold, but I think that account was monetized right away, but I just didn't get paid because I think I just had to make $100, and it really took probably 6 months before I got $100. It was like $140, and then it was a year before I think I even saw $1,000 in a month. Probably more than that, actually, more than a year. But I really loved doing it, and I'd been dating my now girlfriend at the time, since college. Since, like, I'm not wearing any socks, but I'm wearing the Apothecary shoes, so shout out to Apothecary for the shoes and the pants and the shirt and the the hat. But, you know, I feel like if I don't wear Apothecary socks when I'm on camera, you guys are going to flame me. But I'm wearing Apothecary, everything else. Like I said, it's 12:30 at night. I shouldn't even be filming this right now. This is not the right time. I'm going to just open up about everything. You guys are going to hear me ramble for probably 2 hours at this point. I actually don't know how long we've been going. But, so I'd buy a pair of sneakers. I'd go to, was it the Garden City Mall? There was a mall that we'd go to at lunch at my job out in Westbury. I think it was the Garden City Mall. We'd go like maybe once a week. I would buy some sneakers there, take them home, review them, do one a day, and then return them, you know, the next time we went to the mall. Or in some cases, I'd go out to the city at night after work. I get home around 7:30 because, you know, the workday would end at 5 and it was a 2-hour train ride. Eventually, I did get someone to carpool with, but it was still like an hour and a half drive because of the traffic on the BQE. And yeah, I just did that for a year. Like just a year straight of just crunching on these reviews, and nothing was happening. There was at one point, though, I will say, a pretty cool moment. I think SneakerCon New York 2016 was when I met all the big sneaker YouTubers at the time. I'd been to SneakerCon New York before. I'd customized sneakers for SneakerCon New York. I was still doing that. And in fact, my channel used to be called Fowler Customs because my original intent was to create a channel about customizing sneakers and about art. But that, you know, ended up not being the thing that I focused on. So I went to SneakerCon 2016. Tom Stefanik was there. Cousteau was there. Shout out to Jacques Slade, Kais, Tony Bull, Fomer, a lot of people. Actually, Kais might not have been at 20. No, he was, but he just wasn't in the group that I was hanging out with that time. So what happened was, I went there. I was a nobody, and these guys were celebrities. Like, it was crazy. I mean, you guys saw the past podcast with Kais that I was talking to him about, you know, how insane the lines at his booth were. That he wrote that song, and well, not just him, but a couple people wrote a song about the lines at their booth in like 2017, 2018. That was real. Like, these guys were legit celebrities at SneakerCon. You would have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get them to sign something or to buy merch from them or something like that. And I fell for the hype too. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're all great dudes. Like, that's awesome that happened for them, and that's sick. But I was all about it. These guys were like, I wouldn't say heroes, I wouldn't say celebrities to me, but they were definitely people I looked up to because they were doing what I wanted to do. And I saw like, wow, like these guys just have a passion for a cool hobby. And because of that, not only are they making a living, but they're also, you know, they're getting some notoriety from it. And I'm not going to lie, that was appealing. Like, I'm not going to say that it wasn't something I always wanted to have lines in my booth, which funnily enough, I never really got, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But at the time, you know, being I was 24-ish at the time. Somewhere around there. No, I wasn't. That's not true. I'm older than that. I was 25. I think I was 25 at the time. I was older than I probably should have been at the time to be that excited about sneaker YouTubers. But I knew they were going to be there at SneakerCon New York. I think it was the first time that SneakerCon had flown them all out together. And so what I did is I printed up a bunch of shirts that said Fowler Customs, and I tweeted all of them. I was like, yo, Sneaker Life was one of them. I tweeted Sneaker Life. I tweeted, it's Teddy. He was coming up, but he was still he's just the man. He was awesome. Tweeted him. Tweeted Tom Stefanik. I tweeted a bunch of people. The only person who responded was Tom Stefanik. And he was like, I think I tweeted them like, hey, I've got a shirt for you. I'd love to meet up with you or whatever at the event. He responded, and if you hear it from his side of the story, which you might have heard on the Tom Stefanik episode, he's like, this dude had this icon. It was like an FC. And he tweeted me, he's like, I got a shirt for you. And in his head, I'm just like some young kid. Whereas, Tom probably was 18 or 19 at the time. So he was a young kid, actually, in reality. But he thought I was some young kid who was just a fan. And after like 4 hours of being at my booth, no one stopping by, I decided to walk around with some shirts and find some of these guys. So I found a Sneaker Life, said what's up to him. I was like, yo, man. And all these guys were great. They were just super busy. And now being in the position I'm at, I realized, all right, these people had a lot going on. They weren't looking for my booth. And they might have been. But actually, HessKicks did come up and say he was looking for my booth. Shout out to HessKicks. He's all. I'm not like. I feel like I'm making it sound bad. But everyone was great. Everyone was doing their thing. And I was also there. But I ran into Tom Stefanik and I gave him a shirt. I was like, Tom! And he was like, I saw him looking at me. And then I saw something click in his head because he saw me holding up the FC shirt. And he's like, that must be the guy with the shirt. So I went up and I talked to him. And we just started talking. And he's like, dude, I thought you were some little kid, but you're some still pretty young-looking 25-year-old man. We could talk about sneakers. So we did. And we talked for probably an hour at this point. Tom's now one of my best friends. We talk all the time. And it's funny that that's how our relationship sort of started. But, yeah, so he gave me his number. And SneakerCon kind of ended. For me, it was a success because I was like, I just met, all of my favorite sneaker YouTubers. And one of them, I got their number. Like, this is crazy. And it also really inspired me to put out more content. I'm like, if I keep putting out content, this is what can happen. Like, I could be flown out by SneakerCon somewhere, which at the time was my main goal. I was like, in terms of YouTube, that was my main goal. I was like, listen, if I can be flown out by SneakerCon, I can travel for free and I can visit all these places that I've never visited before. And that was something that I really wanted to work towards. And it's interesting, when you do YouTube and hearing other people's stories, I think I would say that most people who are successful in YouTube start because they're passionate about something. They don't start because of the money or because of the success or whatever. The people who do, generally, when they don't get that success immediately, they burn out and they stop. Then again, some people don't. It really just depends on the situation, but I'd say a majority of people do. That being said, even if you're doing something for the passion, you can still find yourself being kind of wooed. Is that the right word? Wooed by the allure of, I'm just using all these college words. Wooed by the, I'm not even sure if I'm using them right. Being sucked into the hype, I should say. You can find yourself being sucked into the hype, and I absolutely was. So at this time, I was actually working at a dog toy company in New York City called BarkBox, actually. And we'll talk more about them later. It's a pretty important part of the story. And what was great about that was I was working right on Canal Street. I'd left my kitchenware job, and now my commute was still probably about 45 to 50 minutes because I was deep in Queens. I was on Putnam Ave. Baby, I was out there. I was near the end of the M. It was literally like a 45. I think I took the M to the J, and I was on Canal Street. It took 45 to 50 minutes during high traffic. And say you miss a train, if you caught all the trains, because I had 2 trains to catch, if you caught all the trains at the right time, you'd be good. But and the train stop was literally right next to my house. In fact, it literally went over the top of my house. If you watch some of my earlier videos, I started filming B-roll shots on the roof, and you'll see it in the background. And because of that, it was every 10 to 15 minutes. I would have to stop recording every 10 to 15 minutes because it would go by. No matter what time of the day or night it was, I would have to stop recording. So my videos initially had a lot of cuts because of the train. It's crazy to think about now. But I was working at BarkBox, and what was great about working at BarkBox on Canal Street was that it was right on the edge of Soho, and that's where all the big sneaker releases were happening. So I was able to, when Kanye first dropped the Yeezy 350s back in 2015, like I had the Confirmed app. I was in New York. I was in the location, and I won on the Adidas Confirmed app. This is right before I started YouTube, so I wasn't actually able to do a video on them, but I was able to go pick up the shoes. Same thing with Pharrell's. Like I was able to go on my lunch break, hit on the Confirm app, go on my lunch break to pick them up. When the Bread Ones dropped, there was events like open to the public for the Bread Ones. I was able to walk over there, check them out during my lunch break or after work. It was a really great location for a sneakerhead because Stadium Goods was there, Flight Club was kind of close, Kith was there. I'd go to Kith all the time at lunch. What else? You had the Nike Lab was crazy. There was a Foot Locker there. The Adidas store was there. There's 2 Adidas stores. Literally every flagship sneaker store was within walking distance of my office. Like close walking distance. Very easy to go at lunch because I had an hour lunch break and I would leave as soon as the clock hit 12 and I'd come back at 1:10. It'd be a little bit longer, but I was working in that location at the time. And the next day the first work day after SneakerCon, I think it was Saturday and then it was Monday, Tom Stefanik was still in New York, and he texted me. He's like, yo, we're actually going out to Sneaker Shop in Soho, and you said that you work around that area. You want to come with us? And I was like, oh, my gosh, this is crazy. And at the time, my boss, who actually used to work at Martha Stewart, funny story, now worked at BarkBox. That's sort of how I got to connect to BarkBox, and now we're still friends to this day. We still possibly could work together in certain capacities. Won't get into it. But he was like, he knew my passion for sneakers. He knew my passion for YouTube. And I told him, like, listen, man, like, is there any way I could take like a 2-hour lunch today and just go out and film with my favorite sneaker YouTubers? Like, this would be crazy. I didn't even film. I just wanted to go out and hang out with them. And he's like, dude, do it. He was one of the, I got a shout out to Dan. Like, Dan's awesome. And I don't think he's ever going to watch this, but shout out to Dan. You are awesome. The best boss I've ever had. He was a perfect mix. And now being a boss, I realize how hard this is. He was a perfect mix of being there for you when you needed a boss, like someone who supported you. He had a great personality, great humor, but he also told you when you sucked or when you effed up. Like, he would be very clear with you on that. And that's something that I think a lot of people and future people that I worked with, won't say where, but future people that I worked with weren't good at. And so yeah, I just had a really great relationship with him. He was never officially a mentor of mine, but I always sort of viewed him as that. Well, yeah, really, really great guy. He knew he's one of those guys that if you get the work done, you can have a little bit of leeway. And so that's what happened in that situation. So I got the leeway. I got to go out. And that day I met Tony, D2 Wild. Shout out to Tony, still a good friend of mine. Bullet RC, good friend of mine. Fomer Simpson, also. All these people are just my friends now, which is crazy to say, but all these people are my friends now. Fomer Simpson, Cousteau, Tom. Was there anyone else? There was a guy from an app. Shout out to Louie. I think that might have been it at the time. I know Kais was probably hanging out with his friends. I don't remember. I don't think Yoanti was there. No, I think it was just those guys. It was just, I've never actually met Yoanti in person. It was just those guys. But we went out and we walked around the city, went all over the place. They were filming vlogs. I'm kind of in the background of some of their vlogs. In my head, I'm like, this is it. Like, I'm going to blow up. This is crazy. I didn't. But it was really great meeting them and sort of seeing their process, because I'd never seen the process of people who were doing it at the time semi-professionally. Some of them were doing it professionally. I think Cousteau was probably the biggest sneaker YouTuber at the time, and he was making decent money. Like, he had just dropped a video on, I think, Michael Jordan's house, and it had like millions of views, and it was crazy. So getting to spend some like 2 hours with them was wild, and it built, at this point, relationships that have lasted almost 10 years, which is, again, wild. So that was a big push for me, a big inspiration in addition to SneakerCon. I continued making content after that, but there was two sort of pivotal moments in my sneaker YouTube journey that kind of really helped me take off. And those two moments were, the first was when I actually got on Kais's, I think it was Crew Collection. We talked about it in his podcast. It was called Crew Collection. He would feature other YouTubers' sneaker collections. Like, you could submit your sneaker collection and he'd let you film a video and then he would post it. And he did that for me, and I really, like, it was a huge thing for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. In fact, now this is where the story gets sad, and I was kind of trying to avoid this a little bit, but I'm going to go into it because I'm just being super open. But one of the major reasons why I started my YouTube channel was because my mom had passed away in the beginning of 2016, and that hit me really hard. And so I sort of used initially YouTube as an outlet. It got me to stop thinking about things. Rather than going out and drinking away my sorrows, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit at home on this Friday night and film a video instead, because I enjoyed doing it. So it really helped me kind of get over that loss. And when my mom passed, she left me, I think it was like $5,000 she left me, which I'd, used for rent and things like that. But I'd saved $1,000 of it, and I just had it in my bank account. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I'd saved $1,000 of the money she left me. And for that Crew Collection, I was like, I need to have a crazy pair of sneakers. And I know, looking back, like, this is kind of, I don't know if, like, I was in the right mindset, but I don't know. I'll just say what I was going to say. So I had $1,000. I was like, I need a crazy pair of sneakers to get on Crew Collection. No, I haven't told this story to anyone. Like, literally no. Maybe my wife, actually, but I haven't told the story to anyone. So I was like, I'm going to go buy a pair of Yeezys, because right now Yeezy 350s are hot, and the Pirate Blacks had just dropped, and there was a pair in my size for exactly $1,000, and I had some money for taxes. So I went and bought them. I bought them at Flight Club for $1,000. I filmed my Crew Collection, and then I just never wore them, because I did a review as well, but I never wore them because I was like, I kind of felt bad. I was like, I've taken this money that my mom gave me. My mom left me because she was, while she was battling cancer, she was working as a receptionist, and she had saved up this money for me, because she knew she was gonna go, and I, in my head, I was like, I can't believe I just spent the last $1,000 of the money that she made for me on a pair of sneakers. But I justified it in my mind, and I think looking back, it wasn't the worst thing to do, because it actually did completely change the course of my life. So my mom actually, in addition to raising me and being, an amazing woman and really instilling her faith in me, which I won't get into this podcast, but faith is a big part of my life, and I think she's the reason why I ended up coming back to Christianity. Again, we won't get into that. This isn't a religious podcast. I realize I've had my pastor on the podcast, but this is not a religious podcast at all. But she was, everyone's mom is the greatest person to them. Or most people's moms are the greatest people to them, and she was that to me. And there's a lot of things I wish I could say, but I can't. Oh, man. So because of her, I started the YouTube channel. I guess because of grief, I started the YouTube channel. And because of her, I bought a pair of Yeezys that I reviewed and then filmed Crew Collection. And I just never wore those Yeezys, and eventually I ended up selling them for $1,000 and got the money back because I just I felt weird about having them. But that Crew Collection got me like a couple thousand subscribers. And I was like, shoot, this could be something legit now. And it was right around that time as well where I think it was this pair right here. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, I'm pulling out my off-white ones, which if you guys watch my channel, you know these. You've seen these a bunch because they're in the background of every video. It was around that time that Virgil Abloh was releasing the off-white collection with Nike. Now, again, because I was working in New York and Soho, I was in close proximity to everything sneaker-related. I also realized I'm talking crazy fast, and I've been working really hard to slow down. Mainly for the podcast, because for the videos and shorts and stuff, it's fine. But for the podcast, I've really been trying to slow down. And how long have we been filming? Oh my gosh, 47 minutes. I got to speed this up. For this last 47 minutes, I have been speed talking, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to try and slow down a little bit. But you guys, I don't know if you guys know this, I have ADHD. I'm all over the place all the time. I talk very fast. I'm working on it, guys. Don't worry. Maybe that's why I was able to get to where I was, because I hyper-focus on things, and maybe that's why I was able to put out videos for a year when nothing was happening. Okay, back to the story. So, near the end of this first year, I'd gotten on Crew Collection, I had met a lot of sneaker YouTubers, and I had entered on the Nike Sneakers app, or maybe it was on Nike's website. I think the Sneakers app was the thing at the time. I had entered a essay competition on the Nike, I guess it was the Sneakers app. No, it couldn't have been because I had to actually submit the essay. I had entered an essay competition on Nike for a chance at office hours, is what they called it, with Virgil Abloh. Like, you had a chance to sit down with him and talk about design, which for me was amazing because as a designer, Virgil Abloh is someone who was working with all these super influential people. I'll be honest, I wasn't super familiar with Pyrex. I wasn't super familiar with Off-White, but I knew the people he was working with, and I actually was more familiar with his work than I thought. I just didn't put two and two together. So I wrote this essay about how I really wanted to talk to him and learn about his design process and learn about things like that. And the reason I did that was because there was like a bunch of entries to have office hour or different. It wasn't like a one-on-one office hours, but it was a chance to like go to a talk with him, and there was sort of hinted at that you could win a pair, or you could buy a pair of shoes from the collection. So I had missed out on all of those other entries. It's not even that I tried to enter; I just didn't even know they happened. So there was one thing left. It was the essay. I entered the essay, and I had this weird feeling in my head, like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like I think I have a good chance at doing well with this, or getting this to happen, because I think there would be 10 winners in 2 days. So it'd be 20 winners, 20 people who got to sit down and talk with him, and it said that on the website. And I was like, out of everybody in New York, if these entries are still open, it means that there's not enough people have entered to close off the entries, like all the other entries that just required you to click a button. And I think I have a good chance because I'm actually a designer. I'm working in New York, and I think I got a shot. And lo and behold, the next day I got an email, or maybe 2 days later, I got an email from Nike saying, you won a chance to go talk to Virgil Abloh. And I was like, this is crazy. So again, shout out to Dan. He let me out of work early that day because I think my meeting with Virgil was at like 4 or 5. So I leave work. I walk down to, I think it was Wall Street is where the pop-up was. I walk down to Wall Street. I go in and I wait for 45 minutes to an hour because everyone else was talking. I was actually the last person on the schedule to talk to him that day. And right before I was about to go in, they were like, yeah, he's done for the day. He had to leave. And I was like, what? I was like, oh my gosh, I don't get to talk to Virgil? Like, seriously? They're like, we might be able to squeeze you in tomorrow, but no guarantees. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, definitely, please. Like, I had brought my camera and everything. I was ready to film. I was so excited. But they were like, listen, if you want to go in and buy the shoes, like, you can go buy the shoes. And I was like, what? They didn't. So it was interesting the way that they did this. They handed you a card. I had also learned at this point that we were able to buy the shoes because they were handing out people like as they left a card, and I could see that on the card there were shoes. So what this card would have would be, I think it was 5 pairs of shoes that were available. It was the ones, it was the Prestos, it was the Blazers, it was the Air Max 95s, and I think it was or Air Max 90s, and I think it was the Air Forces maybe? I know the Converses weren't part of it. I know I think it was those 5. And you'd write down like the order that you'd want the shoes and then your shoe size. And then they'd pick whatever they had left. So I was like, cool, I'll just buy the shoes and maybe I'll get to meet with him tomorrow. So obviously I ranked the Jordan 1 Chicago's as my favorite. And at the time it was funny because people weren't like hype on them. Like people were tweeting like, this is garbage, all this stuff. I didn't care. Like I love Jordan 1s. It was a Chicago colorway. I thought it looked sick. And I understood his process because I had done some research because I wanted to talk to him. So I had written that as number 1. I think I had the Prestos as number 2, all this stuff. And I get in line, and the guy in front of me wanted a size 9 Air Jordan 1 Chicago. And the guy came up and he's like, hey, listen, we don't have any size 9s left. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I quickly go in and I change my number to 8.5 for the Jordan 1s. And they told other people you can't change your numbers, but I scratched it out really quick and then wrote an 8.5. It was with a pen. And I was like, these people just aren't, like, I'm just not getting the Jordan 1. But I tried it. And the guy came up with a size 8.5 Jordan 1. I got it for retail, and it was crazy. It was the craziest thing. Like, he literally went down, took my card, went down, came up with a Jordan 1, and I was like, thank God I did that because I never would have gotten these shoes. And if you know how big of a part that they've played on this channel, that would have been crazy. And we'll continue on to that story in a second. But I took the shoes home. I filmed a review because I'm like, listen, I've got these shoes. This event was like a month before the drop. So I had gotten these shoes from a legit Nike drop. There was one woman who had dropped a review of the shoes, and I don't know if she was involved with Nike or something, but there's only one video of the shoes out. And it was a woman who got like maybe 100,000 views or something, which is at the time crazy. It's still pretty crazy. Very crazy, actually. I dropped my review on the shoes. I tried them on. I did all my regular review stuff, and the video just took off overnight. Like, I think the next morning it had like 60,000 views or something like that. It was crazy. At least for my channel, it was crazy. And I was like, okay, well, after work today, I'm going to try and go back and see if I can meet with Virgil. But there was something in my head like, yo, I wonder if I should try and get Virgil to sign these shoes because I think that could be like, I'm not going to sell these shoes. Like at the time, they were going for like maybe I think 1,000 at that day just because it was early. I was like, you know what? I'm probably just going to keep these and rock these. Like, let's see if I can get him to sign them. No one else was able to get him to sign stuff because you got the shoes after you met with him. So I bring one of the shoes in my backpack. Somehow, I'm able to get this meeting with Virgil. It was incredible. He was an amazing, amazing guy. May he rest in peace. Like, genuinely, just super, super. I just don't genuinely have enough good things to say about him. From the realistically 10 minutes that I talked to him, he was incredibly encouraging about my design career. He gave me tips. He told me about himself. He told me about his design process, which was what I was asking about. And it was just an incredibly wholesome, really great experience. And I just really, really appreciated him taking the time to stay a little bit. I genuinely think I was, again, the last person, but I think he stayed a little bit extra because he knew that I'd missed the other day. And I met him and then New York Sunshine. It was like a 2-part meeting. And I have a picture of both of them. And I'm just like cheesing, like, oh my God, this is Virgil Abloh. It's so crazy. And the picture's horrible, but like it's amazing at the same time. And at the end of the interview, I'm like, yo, could you actually sign these shoes? And I pull out the Chicago ones, and he's like, whoa, you want me to sign those? And this was, I'm telling you, this was literally a week before he signed any of the Virgil Was Here stuff that went out to like Serena and LeBron and stuff. And that was obviously his signature, but like no one had really seen that yet at the time. So he signed it. He didn't write Virgil Was Here, but he wrote Air Fowler. I'll show you. So the reason I brought up the thing about Serena and LeBron is because on those shoes he signed Virgil Was Here, and he also wrote Air and then their last name. So for mine, he wrote Air Fowler, which was crazy. Now, he didn't write Virgil Was Here because I was getting shooed out of the room, and he literally only had enough time to do that one. And it took him, he was thinking about what he wanted to write because I don't know if he felt like he was going to ruin the shoes or something. He was like, are you sure you want me to sign those? Like, you're not going to be able to do anything with these. I'm like, no, I want you to sign them. And I actually have an audio recording of that experience. They wouldn't let me film it, but they gave us all little recorders that we could save because apparently they didn't want us to film, but they still wanted us to be able to listen back to the discussion that we had with Virgil. So I had an audio recording. I made a whole vlog about it. It's still on my channel. I posted it that night. And for part of it, I play part of the audio recording, like a little bit of the design process, and then me saying, hey, would you sign my shoes? And he's like, really? Or something like that. I don't remember his exact words, but yeah. So we signed them, and that vlog also did really well. And I posted pictures all over Twitter, Instagram, and people didn't believe me. They're like, why would you? Well, they believed that I got the shoes, but they didn't believe that Virgil signed the shoes. So I like quote tweeted him, and he actually like hearted it and then said, I don't know if he actually commented back or if he just like hearted it and said like, great meeting you or something. I don't remember exactly what he responded to the tweet in some way that basically verified like, no, it was actually me, which I really appreciated. He didn't have to go out of his way and do that. But I say all that to say this, that those probably 2 experiences that I had with either influencers in the case of, maybe 3 experiences, let's say 3 experiences. Influencers in the case of like Tom reaching out and being really great, letting me hang out with all the guys, and then obviously meeting all the guys. Kais putting me on Crew Collection, and then Virgil Abloh allowing me to not only interview him, but get a pair of shoes early that no one else had, which literally put my channel on the map because that was like the first video that I had that really took off because no one else had them, and it was a crazy hyped up pair of shoes. And as we all saw, like it became one of the most iconic collaborations of all time. Those 3 sort of things were I would say the accelerators that took my channel from already having like a backlog of a year worth of videos. Like I was working my butt off and I wasn't planning on stopping, but that was really where the acceleration started. And that's when I started to gain like 10,000 subscribers a month. And it just started to take off. And I just kind of kept going from there. I started getting invited to events. There was this one event where Sneaker Talk invited me out to. He invited to a Converse event, and we got to fly over New York City in a helicopter. It was crazy. Shout out to Sneaker Talk. And then I would get invited to like Jordan brand events. They flew me out to LA for All-Star Weekend one year. It was crazy. Just a lot of really great stuff started happening. While this was all happening, though, I was still working at BarkBox, and I think the people at BarkBox started to notice my work slipping badly. Like I would be at work, I'd have YouTube videos on my phone would be upside down, my headphones were in, and I'd be listening about camera technology and like ways that I could improve videos, and I'd be on like sneaker news all the time, Kicks on Fire, Complex, like all these different websites trying to learn about all the newest drops, and then I'd be taking like hour and a half lunches, and I just was not focused for the last like probably 6 months that I was there. And Dan was no longer my boss. He'd moved to a different department. I'd moved to a different department. I got a new boss who, shout out to him, not a bad dude at all. I think that I didn't mesh well with his, style of being a boss. And I'm not a mean person at all. And I'm not confrontational either. But like, I just couldn't, like, I just never felt comfortable around him. And so I think I probably acted in ways that were not. This sounds like I did something. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything to get let go. There was layoffs at the company. My work was suffering because I guess that is doing something. My work was suffering because I was focusing on YouTube. And they let me go. And I'll be honest, I did see it coming because my boss had put in like a meeting with like one of his higher ups on the calendar, which I saw. And it was something like about prep for Friday. And I was like, Friday, that's so weird. Like I have nothing in my calendar for Friday. Like, and it didn't. There was nothing that would have tied that to me, but in my head, we'd had some like meetings where he's like, listen, like your work is slipping, we haven't been getting along too great. Like I feel like something's got to give here. And so I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen. So I got let go, but that was the first time I'd ever gotten fired from anything. And it was like, for me, a dream job in New York City working with dogs. I met some really great people. I met Jonathan Graziano, who's John Graz on TikTok. He literally blew up, him and his dog Noodle. They have 4 million subscribers, or John has 4 million subscribers on TikTok, and is still a friend of mine. And also someone else from this woman, Stacy, from BarkBox, blew up as well. She built like a house from a school. A lot of really great content creators came out of there. But that's neither here nor there. What happened was I got let go. There was sort of a day where they just had a bunch of layoffs. They told me that I wasn't experienced enough. And I think that was just a nice way of saying, you don't care about this job, so we don't want you here. And looking back on it now, 100% they were right. I would have fired me any day of the week. I was not focused. I didn't care about that job anymore. And it was really more of a hit to my ego than anything. And wow, I'm saying like a lot of stuff I've never said. And I probably shouldn't say it on the internet, but I'm going to say it anyway. So yeah, it was a hit to my ego. But I will say I was very blessed at that point. I think this all happened for a reason, because at that point I had 100,000 subscribers and I was making the same amount on YouTube that I was making at my job. And I think at that point I mean, I was making decent money. I really was. Like, I think like in the $60,000 something range. And I was living in New York paying $500 a month on rent, buying sneakers. Like, I didn't have money at the end of the day, but I also like wasn't going into debt, paying off college loans, things like that. But I was making about that on YouTube. And so when I got let go, actually what's funny is that I had started making that like maybe 2 months earlier. Like, YouTube had really started picking up because of the, the Virgil Abloh stuff. That happened at the end of 2017. I got let go in the beginning of 2018. I had just done my first taxes with H&R Block, where I had YouTube income and my W-2 income. And I actually had to pay taxes for the first time rather than getting any kind of money back. And so in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be making like $120,000 a year if I can keep this up, if I can keep my job at Bark, and then I can also like make YouTube videos. But pretty quickly I was let go from Bark. So I was back to making $60,000, which is, again, totally fine. But it really hit me hard, like really, really hard. And for about a week, I was like, I just didn't know what to do with myself, because I knew that YouTube was something I wanted to pursue, but I just really needed to kind of decompress because, I don't know, I think it was a lot emotionally with my mom passing a little bit before that, and kind of realizing that I was moving on with my life in a way that like nothing that I was doing, this is so deep, I've never really said this anywhere, but I was kind of moving on with my life in a way that she didn't know about. Like everything else that I'd done to that point, my mom knew about. Like she knew my girlfriend that I was dating, my wife now. She knew what job I had. She knew all this stuff. But that was sort of a time where it took she actually never knew about my YouTube channel. She knew I had done YouTube in the past, but she never knew about my current YouTube channel. So that was kind of like a pretty big, it was sort of a double whammy. It was like, on one sense, I'm getting told that, I felt like I was getting told I wasn't good enough because I had been a designer for years at this point, and I was getting told I didn't have enough experience, which obviously wasn't the real reason. It was because I sucked. It's because I sucked at my job. At least I'm hoping that's what it was. Because if it was just for the no experience thing, then that's a dumb reason to let someone go who's worked at a job for 2 years. You think 2 years of experience would be enough experience. 2 years of experience at that job, it doesn't matter. That's not the reason why I got let go. The reason I got let go is because I sucked at my job. But it was a lot emotionally going on. So at that point, I decided, you know what? I'm going to move back to Philly. That's where my girlfriend is. I don't want to like get another job in New York. It's just not worth it. I want to do YouTube full time. We'll see if I can do it. So I moved back to Philly, and rent's not as cheap as it was in New York because obviously $500 a month, it's hard to come by, even in Philly. But I was living, in a little neighborhood, sort of, I guess it's within the city limits. I won't say where, but it was somewhere in Philly. And I just started pumping on YouTube. And in that next 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, is when the channel just exploded. I went from 100,000 subscribers to, I think by 2020, 700,000 or 800,000 subscribers. And by that point, I was making good money. Really, really good money. Views were amazing. Like, I could pretty much guarantee 100,000 views on every video that I made. And while that wasn't like Casey Neistat numbers or David Dobrik numbers or Logan Paul numbers, for like a YouTuber, 100,000, I'd be stoked on 100,000 views per video now. Now in 2025. I've been doing all that, everything had been going great. That's sort of where I guess the hardest part of the story was that, like, the part that really defined my YouTube career was sort of around 2018. Well, I guess from 2016 to 2018. But you guys see, the whole story from between there. If you watch my channel, you can see it all happen on camera. I just slowly grow. 2020 obviously happens. And that's when I reconnect with my good friend Osman from college, and that's when we started Apothecary. So Apothecary was a sock brand that we started because we had been wanting to create a product together for years, and we just never had. He'd been working a full-time job in Philly, and I'd been living in New York, and it just never materialized. And we're both huge sneakerheads, and we realized, you know what? We want to create something. In my head, I was like, I want it to be somewhat sneaker-related because I love sneakers, and it would be so easy to promote on my YouTube channel. And he had made socks before. So he had some factory connections, and we were like, you know what? Let's try socks because we think we can make socks better. He has the connections. I got the channel to promote it. Let's do it. And I never wanted it to be YouTube merch because I had dropped YouTube merch before, like Seth Fowler shirts or Fowler custom shirts. They'd always bombed. They were terrible. Never really worked out. Shout out to everyone who bought that stuff and has worn it to SneakerCon. I've met a lot of people who have worn the stuff. I don't think they probably have it anymore, but shout out to them, the true fans. Yeah, so we started Apothecary in 2020 as just a side thing. And we did, I think, a drop of 4 socks. We designed it in like June and then we designed it in like April. We got it in like June and then dropped it in July. And the way that we dropped it was I promoted in like 3 or 4 videos leading up to the drop that I was going to be dropping socks. And if you wanted a chance to buy the socks, they're limited. Sign up for our email list and we will, you'll get notified right when they drop. Not realizing how successful that first drop would be. So we set up for this email list drop. I think we had probably, I know at the time the minimums for the socks were like 150 pairs or 100 pairs per color. So I think we probably had 400 to 600 socks, which I thought was going to take months and months to sell out. Like I'd sold shirts before. I didn't think it was going to be anything crazy. I thought it was going to be a slow burn. So we dropped the email list. We did a private link. We basically locked the website. We did a private link to email subscribers the day before the actual drop, thinking, okay, we'll sell like 50 of them, or maybe half of them if we're lucky, and then we'll drop the rest on the next day, and hopefully they'll sell out because, we've already sold some of them. But within the first 10 to 30 minutes of the email being out, they completely sold out. And we're sitting there thinking, first of all, crap, we don't have any product to drop for the actual drop. And crap, now we have to pack 600, or I guess it was 400 to 600. It was probably closer to 400, maybe like 450, 500 pairs of socks. And so we did. So that weekend, we literally sat and we packed socks for 2 days straight because we didn't know what we were doing. We were using a regular inkjet printer, taping it on with packing tape. We bought a bunch of like envelopes from, they were like, I guess, poly mailers from Office Max or whatever, or maybe Amazon. And that first drop, we basically, in order to buy the socks, I think we spent $1,000 initially to like set up the website, to buy the socks, all that sort of stuff, register our LLC and things like that. We took all that money. I think we had made, I don't know, the math is pretty easy on that. 400 to 500 pairs of socks, $15 a sock, we made a couple grand. We reinvested all of it. We basically took the socks took the money and we bought more socks. And then for our next drop, we actually saved some of the socks. We kept them aside because we wanted to drop some tie-dye socks. We thought tie-dye, at the time, tie-dye was popping. So we saved like, I think 50 pairs or maybe 100 pairs of the white socks. And we tie-dyed them. Like in his first time, it was in my backyard, in my neighborhood. And then the second time was in his driveway in his neighborhood. And so we basically, the rest of that year, the rest of 2020, I think we had like 2 or 3 more drops. We were pretty like lax about it. We dropped one like maybe once every month. It was probably once every 2 months, maybe every 3 months. The next drop was, I think, like a Yeezy inspired collection in terms of colors. Like it was maroons. It was the stuff that Kanye was sort of wearing. It was like maroons, tans, greens, with an Apothecary logo down the side. And we had saved some of those to like tie-dye. So we had 2 different very limited tie-dye drops. And it was all just selling out like crazy. This is all during COVID as well. So I continue my YouTube career. I continue making sneaker videos. I start up a tech channel on the side, which I made like a couple videos for and then just completely left. Probably 2021 or 2022. And we continue doing socks. But for the first like 2 or 3 years, we didn't take it seriously. It was like, we're going to make some socks. Probably drop them I think it ended up being like once every 2 months, once every 3 months, and it would be like, again, like 400 or 500 pairs of socks, and they would just always sell out because we just weren't making a huge amount, and we weren't dropping them a lot. And like there was hype behind them because people would be like, I can't buy these socks, they're always sold out. So it didn't even matter about the design. And we were so busy with our other jobs, like for me YouTube and for him something else, also a design job though, and we were just so busy with those jobs that like we'd, design these socks. We'd be like, okay, shoot, we should drop a collection at least for like the 4th of July or something. So we should have something designed because, it takes 2 months generally for the socks to be made and then shipped to us. So the night before like our deadline was, we'd be like, okay, we got to do something real quick. So we designed something. The designs weren't bad. I mean, we're designers, so they were fine, but like they're nowhere near as good as they are now because we have an actual team designing them. So we did that. We dropped, I think in 2021 and 2022, we probably dropped like maybe 5 collections each year or something like that. We didn't take it very seriously. We reinvested most of the money, but then at the end of the year, we take like I forget what it's called. Like when you're a business owner, you could take like I know the word. I say it all the time. Not all the time, but I say it enough. There's a word where the owners can take like a payout at the end of the year. We do that. And then in 2023, at this point, we had rented an office for a couple $100 a month at like a share space. And then because we needed a place to store the socks, we couldn't store it in my apartment. We couldn't store it in his apartment because we had boxes of socks. And we needed somewhere to like receive the socks when we weren't there. So we had a wear space. I think it was called 1776. And then in maybe end of 2022, we had rented a place in North Philly, I guess is where it was. And it was like kind of like a storefront that used to be a realty office. We rented a place there. And that's when we hired our first employee, who was Josh, who's, you guys probably know, he just left the company recently because he went and got, a finance job. Good for him. Happy for him. Miss him a lot, but happy for him. And we hired him as sort of a part-time shipping guy, and like we used him in all our photo shoots. Like he'd be our model. So he would pack probably 2 or 3 times a week, and we started dropping more consistently. We stored all of our product in that office. It was like a 2-floor office, so it kind of sucked because all the boxes would be downstairs, and then for the drop days, he'd have to bring all the boxes upstairs. And then you'd have to pack them and ship them and take them to the post office or whatever. And obviously we were involved in that, but not as involved. And that was something I was really grateful for because I sucked at packing socks. I've gotten better at it. I've worked on it a lot. But at that point I was sending out a lot of the wrong orders, or it would take me forever. And Josh kind of got it down to a science and was killing it with that. So then in 2023, mind you, YouTube is still going. Like nothing's really, 2022 I hit 1 million subscribers, which was really cool. I was doing, I think like a lot of shorts at that point. I was doing a lot of 3D printing. I went crazy hard into 3D printing. That's probably a story for a different day. And I was doing a lot more design stuff on YouTube too. I kind of leaned back into design after not doing any customs on the channel. I leaned back into design, and that really helped grow the channel. So in 2023, we decided to move to a different office. It's more of a warehouse. It's actually where we're at now. And that's when we started to take things more seriously, because in 2023, we hired Josh full-time. He was our only full-time employee at that point. And then I think either late 2023 or beginning of 2024, I think it was late 2023, Osman went full-time. So Osman and Josh were full-time at the office with Apothecary, and then we were taking it super seriously. Like we were growing like crazy too. I don't remember what we didn't do, a huge amount of money our first year. Our second year we did maybe 50 to 100,000, and then our third year it was like a huge spike. It was like $400,000 we did. And then in 2023 it was like we did like I think over 1 million. I think we hit the 1 million mark. We broke $1 million in sales, and we had just gotten to connect with like Zoomies. We'd started getting into some retail partners, and that's when like that Osman needed to go full time because it started to really, really take off at that point. So I guess that's sort of where the story goes now, because it's 2025. We're halfway through the year. I've continued doing YouTube. I'm now married to my girlfriend, who I started dating in 2012. We got married in 2020. And I've been married to her for 5 years, obviously. I have a daughter. I'm a dad now. I'm in my early 30s, early-ish 30s. I'm still doing sneaker YouTube, but obviously, as you guys know, sneakers are not as popular as they were, from probably 2016 to 2022. So I would say in my head, the sneaker channel, while still my main focus in terms of content, it's starting to take a backseat to my tech channel, which I'm focusing on a lot more. That just hit 100,000 subscribers. I don't know if you guys see the plaque. I've got 3 YouTube plaques now. I've got my 1 million subscriber plaque for my sneaker channel, my OG 100,000 subscriber plaque, which I got when I was still at Bark, actually, and I paraded around the office, and that's probably one of the reasons they fired me, because they're like, this guy's an a-hole. And then the third one, I really did. I was like, did you guys see my plaque yet? And then the third one is the new 100,000 subscriber plaque for my tech channel, which I'm really enjoying. Check out the tech channel if you haven't yet. So yeah, I guess that's sort of where the story ends, at least at this point in my life. Apothecary is going great. Josh just left us, unfortunately, like I said, but we now have an incredible graphic designer who's full-time. We've got a lot of shipping guys now, and we are, we've got a bunch of photographers, and we are looking to expand and continue to expand. Obviously, there's challenges, when you start a business, especially a product-based business. There's been tariffs, and there's been, I don't think we're at Zoomies anymore. They didn't reorder, so I'm guessing after a couple orders, they didn't reorder, so I don't think we're at Zoomies anymore. So, there's things like that. But generally, the business is doing better than it's ever done, and I think we're moving in a really, really good direction. We're getting into some new retailers, which I'm really excited about. And I think we're going to do a podcast with me and Osman talking about Apothecary, going a lot more in depth into sort of the whole process, because I kind of just did an overlying view of it. I'd also really like to do a podcast more on YouTube stuff, because I think there's probably I would guess that there's a lot of people out there who are watching who maybe are interested in getting into content. And I'd love to sort of tell you guys everything that I know about content, because I feel like content is such a broad thing that literally anyone can do it for any subject and be successful. I think it's just, there's a couple things that you have to do and be aware of, and traps you don't want to fall into, but there's not really anything that would mean that you can't do it. I realize it sounds like I'm selling a course. I'm just going to drop a podcast. I probably shouldn't do this if I ever want to sell a course, but I'm not going to, by the way, also. At least I don't plan to. Watch if someone clips this in 10 years I have a course, because I have nothing else going on. Oh my gosh, they definitely are if I do have a course. But I'm going to drop a podcast and just maybe some YouTube videos, I don't know, and just like lay out everything that I know about YouTube, which honestly I've learned most of it from other YouTubers. But I think that, long story short, I think anyone can do it. I think you just got to be persistent, and there's room for everyone. You know, there's a bunch of sneaker YouTubers now, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for new ones. As you guys have seen, every couple of years, like a bunch of new ones pop up. They're better than the old ones. In my case, Elliot Page popped up. He's the British Seth, and he's better than me. So, like, there's always space for it. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of short form. Shout out to Elliot Page, by the way. He is the dude. I love that guy. He's so great. Shout out to Elliot Page. Please subscribe. I've had a really good experience on YouTube. I've had a really good experience with all the other sneaker YouTubers generally. I'd say generally all of them are my friends. I have nothing bad to say about any of them, really. But I do want to give a huge thank you to everyone listening to the podcast and everyone who supported the brand Apothecary or watched any of my videos. Because if it wasn't for you guys, really that's who I should be thanking the entire video. If it wasn't for you guys, none of this would be possible. And I know that's cliche to say, but genuinely, like, literally, like, if people weren't clicking on the videos, no one would be watching the videos. And consequently, no one would be checking out the brand and no one would be trying out our socks. So yeah, I kind of feel like it's kind of fell apart at the end here. But yeah, that's been my content journey. And that's been sort of a light overview of my life. It's not the most exciting. It's not the most interesting. But I would hope that this would give you guys hopefully it gives you guys some encouragement in some way. Or maybe it inspired you in some way. Probably not, but if it did, great. And I feel like the main goal for this podcast is to inspire and encourage. You know, if you're a content creator and you are stuck in a rut, or maybe you're where I was the first year where you just couldn't get anything done, or you weren't seeing any results from the things that you were doing, just knowing that it's all about persistence, and like a loser like me, literally a loser like me, could make it a full-time job. And hey, maybe this doesn't last forever, but for the last almost 10 years at this point of doing YouTube, and then 7 years of doing it full-time, I mean, you know, success can be had, I think, for anybody. So it's just a matter of, you know, doing the right thing, staying consistent. Yeah. And I feel blessed. You know, I feel like there was divine intervention in a lot of things that happened, but I also feel like there's an element of luck, you know? So it's a little bit of everything. But hey, with that being said, I guess we should round things off. Now, usually we do sock shopping for the YouTube specific watchers. In this case, I'm just going to do something that's a little bit different than that because obviously I own the sock company. So I have way more socks than I need. So instead what I'm going to do is, I guess for the Spotify listeners and the Apple listeners, you guys can stick around for a second. I'm going to talk about the new shoe that we have coming out. This is the Apothecary Mule. This is the blue one. I'm going to show both cameras just in case you guys wanted to see it. Both cameras. This is the blue one. There's a black one. There's a cream one. There's a red one. There's an orange one. It's all the colors that Zellerfeld prints. So this is a fully 3D printed shoe. Produced and manufactured, well, I guess produced by Apothecary, but manufactured by Zellerfeld. They did help with the design process. They CAD modeled it, and we worked with one of their designers to kind of make something that was 3D printer friendly. But the whole idea behind this shoe is, as a sock brand and as a brand that makes comfy clothing, we wanted to make a shoe that was not only comfy, which I've got to say this shoe is like ridiculously soft. It feels, one thing I got to say about Zellerfeld shoes, which you guys may or may not know from watching my reviews, they feel like, it doesn't feel like 3D printed TPU. It feels like a foam. It's nuts. So this shoe literally feels like a foam clog. It's really, really wild. We wanted to create a shoe that not only looked good and was easy to throw on with like a comfy fit or a more dressed up fit or even more, you know, probably wouldn't play basketball in these, but more like vibey sort of fit, and also was incredibly comfortable. And I think we actually achieved that with this. And so far, the feedback's been really positive. I've made a lot of shoes in my day. I've actually made a lot of shoes, and people wanted to give me a lot of crap for the Shattered Backboard review that I did because they're like, you don't know anything about leather. I made a lot of leather shoes, boys. I made a lot. Oh man, I didn't even talk about oh my gosh, I didn't even go into shoe design. Oh my goodness, we should do that in another episode. If you guys want to see more of these solo episodes, let me know. But I've designed a lot of shoes. I designed the Planters Peanuts shoe that dropped in 2019, 2018, 2017 maybe. It was a collaboration with VaynerMedia. Shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk. At the time, I didn't know him, but now I do. Awesome guy. I don't know him very well, but I met him now. And Planters Peanuts. That was the first shoe I really, I did the sketch for that, and then Richie Range actually like produced it. Like he put all the patterns together and stuff. I think I wasn't too familiar with who actually did all the internal working. It was like a company he worked with. And then I did some shoes with We Are Underdogs, which, as you guys know, We Are Underdogs kind of went out of business out of nowhere. I ended up having to pay a bunch of people who bought the shoes back. I didn't have to, but I wanted to because I felt like, again, like this is so. We're going very off topic here. But I created some leather shoes for We Are Underdogs. and then collabed with some cool people and had some collaborations drop, and then a second silhouette. Again, some things happened with that company. Maybe I'll do a whole episode on that company, but I ended up paying people back who bought the shoe. And the good news was that it wasn't a lot of people because people didn't really like the design of the shoe. I think initially the shoe did well. I think we sold like 150, 200 pairs. They were very expensive. They were like $250 or something for the shoe that was supposed to look different, but because of the constraints that we had, it didn't look as good as I wanted it to. Maybe in total we sold like almost 1,000 shoes. I don't know. But the last probably set of orders, of pre-orders, there was like 32 of them, and the company kind of disappeared. The guy that I had stayed at his house while I was making these shoes, he wasn't in the vlog, but the vlog is still up. He was taking me around Portugal. I won't talk about him because I don't. Here's why I have to. Well, okay, I'm really getting into things. I will say this: I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he got in a bad situation, and rather than taking accountability, I think he dipped. Is what I think happened. But I don't know. I have not talked to this guy since it all happened. I reached out to him for like a month, and he stopped responding to me, and no one was getting their shoes. So I ended up paying back around. I got the list of people who bought the shoes. I reached out to all of them, or everyone that I could, and I also posted on social media everywhere like, hey, if you bought these shoes and haven't gotten the shoes yet, please send me your order number and I'll pay you back. And I ended up paying people out of my own pocket back. And I'm not saying that, genuinely, I'm not saying that because I'm like, oh, I'm a good guy. Genuinely, it was because, one, they were supporting me and paying a lot of money. Two, at the time, I was making decent money, and so it wasn't like a huge problem for me. So it didn't hurt me financially. I was also single, so it's not like I had kids or a wife to, support at that point. Oh, maybe I wasn't single. No, it was 2020. I wasn't single, but it was just me and my wife, and we were doing fine. She was working a job, I was working a job, we were good to go. And it ended up being spread out over like 6 months. So it was $8,000, but it ended up being spread out over 6 months. Doesn't matter. But I felt like it was the right thing to do because they weren't going to get their money back, and a lot of them had been waiting for months, and their bank wasn't going to charge back at that point. So, oh my gosh, dude, this is the ADHD, man. I'm telling you, I just got totally distracted. Those shoes were all leather. I went to Portugal, checked out leather shoes. I've made leather shoes. I've probably made, if we count all the different colorways, I've probably made 8 to 10 different pairs of shoes. So this is the first pair that's actually the next official drop, but it's the first pair that I'm dropping that's universally been pretty positively received. All my other shoes, there's been a lot of positive, but also a lot of negative. This is the first pair that I think people are genuinely very positive for. And you might feel differently. Let me know in the comments, I guess. But I think it's a cool shoe because it's fully 3D printed. That's something that I'm passionate about, 3D printing. And it looks sick, and it's very wearable. So there's that. That was sort of the story behind the shoe. If you want to grab it, we don't have a release date yet. I'll be completely transparent with you. The reason we don't, because the shoe's ready to go, is because we are trying to plan out a special launch for it and integrate it with our website and things like that. And that's just taking a bit longer than we thought. So stay tuned for that. It'll be an interesting sort of production thing. If you've never bought a pair of shoes from Zellerfeld, if you don't come to one of our launches, which will have pre-printed shoes, you take a picture of your foot in a sock next to a piece of paper, and then they literally make the shoe around your foot so that it fits you perfectly. And then it takes 2 months, I think, in total from when they start. At the latest or the longest, I think it takes around 2 months. I could be wrong, but that's what I've heard because I bought shoes from them as well. And I know that I've talked to them about it. But you buy the shoe. 2 months later, you got the shoe that's perfectly printed for you in a box. And obviously, we are going to print a bunch of pairs early so that there are pairs that we can sell that are pre-printed. They won't fit you exactly. I mean, they'll be your size, but they're not going to be like one-to-one like the 3D printed ones would be, or the fully like customized ones would be. But just know that when they launch, a lot of people have to wait a little bit of time to get them, but that's just how Zellerfeld does it. Zellerfeld also makes the Nike Air Max 1000s. In that case, they're not doing custom shoes for people. They're just printing out a bunch of sizes and then selling them. Or I think they did do custom for people at ComplexCon. I don't know about the wheat ones that are coming out. Zellerfeld also has worked with Sean Witherspoon, Jeff Staple. They're dropping, based on the pictures, they won't confirm or deny this because I don't think they're allowed to, but Justin Bieber's been dropping pictures of a very obviously Zellerfeld printed shoe. So we're in very elite company with being given the opportunity to work with Zellerfeld. So I'm really excited about that. And these shoes are, I think, unlimited quantity. Like, I think we could maybe cut the production time, the amount of time that will allow them to be on the website. I don't know why we do that, but we might if we release a second one or something. But they're not going to sell out. It's just like the longer you wait, the longer it might take to produce because they're printing a bunch of them. So all that being said, stay tuned. They're coming soon. We've been teasing them for a bit now, but they are coming soon. They're incredibly comfortable. And because it's Zellerfeld, you can pick any of the colors that Zellerfeld prints. So black, cream, blue, red, orange, white. Yeah, it's sick. You got to try it. It's incredibly comfortable, and I think they look dope. And I really appreciate it. So let me know what you guys think of this solo podcast in the comment section down below. Our next guest is pretty cool. We've got a couple of really cool guests coming up. And if you haven't watched, our previous episode with Kai Somar, or with Gabriel Fortson, or Bobby Souls, or any of the other really great guests that we've had on recently, I highly encourage you to check them out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.